chief guests, the guest speakers who have joined us online. Professor and HOD of Physiology, Velamal Medical College Hospitals and Research Institute, Madurai, Dr. Vidya Mohandas, Kamakshi Memorial Hospital, Palikaranai, Chennai, HODs, and all participants. On behalf of the Department of Physiology, I welcome you all to today's webinar on physiology of stress and its management. And I thank our chairman, Satish Sir, Dean, Vice Principal, Medical Superintendent, DMS, Control of Examinations, Director Academics for granting us permission and also for all their valuable support in conducting today's webinar successfully. I also thank today's speakers, Anu and Dr. Vidya Mohandas, for accepting our invitation and joining us in today's webinar. Stress has become a part and parcel of day-to-day life. In today's competitive world, and COVID pandemic has further added to stress of everyday life. Because Hans Selye, who first coined the term stress, and defined stress as a non-specific response of the body to a demand for change and the various changes that occur in a body in response to stress we call general adaptation syndrome. While the hormones released during acute stress helps the individual to cope up with a stressful situation, continuous exposure of the body to these hormones in case of chronic stress can cause many diseases. To tell us more about stress, we have two eminent speakers, Dr. Anu and Dr. Mohandas. Dr. Anu will talk on physiology of stress and Dr. Vidya Mohandas will talk on management of stress. Once again, I extend a warm welcome. I thank all the participants for joining us. Any queries can be posted in the chat box and that will be addressed at the end of both the sessions by the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request our Dean P. Shanmugam sir to felicitate the webinar.
Good morning to one and all. It is a great pleasure to inaugurate this webinar on stress management. In fact, everybody, we also have stress, students have stress, everybody has stress. So we want to know more from Dr. Anu and Dr. Vidya. As eminent people talk about the stress and its management. I welcome you on behalf of the chairman and the management, and thank you for taking part in this seminar. I congratulate the Department of Physiology for organizing. We have a very important aspect that we know stress. That is every day, everywhere is omnipotent, like is there every day. So the related problems are more, and the students are under stress. We are also under stress. So let us see how we are going to manage the stress situation, and it's a good topic and that to be discussed on this COVID situation. And everybody we need some relief and consolation from everybody. So I thank you for taking this topic as for discussion and the webinar. I hope all the delegates and who are taking part in this webinar will benefit. They go with some idea about the management of stress and the related problem and its management. Thank you for giving an opportunity. I congratulate the Department of Physiology for organizing such a good topic in the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh,
Now I request our Vice Principal, Dr. B. Usha ma'am, to say a few words.
Respected Dean Dr. P. Shanmugam, our Medical Superintendent Dr. N. Mohan, HOD of Physiology Dr. Uma Maheshwari, and other faculties of the Department of Physiology. On behalf of Annapurna Medical College and Hospital, I extend my warm welcome to Dr. Anu and Dr. Vidya Mohandas And these two people are very eminent speakers, and I know very well about Dr. Ranu, who is a very good orator and very student friendly when she was here. So I hope that we will be addressing the physiology of stress. And Dr. Vidya Mohandas will be addressing on the management of stress. As our dean has mentioned, this COVID has kept us in a situation of total stress. So we want to learn from you how it is going to be treated and how we are going to come out of this stressful situation. So hoping for the best and happy learning, and thank you one and all for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, first, Medical Superintendent Dr. N. Morgan to share the webinar.
Good morning to all. Respected our beloved chairman and respected dean, vice principal, Department of Physiology. I congratulate the speakers who are all well-known academicians, and the topic is also nowadays it is the stress management of COVID, post-COVID management. So as rightly pointed out our vice principal madam and dean, it will be a very good session post undergraduate and our surgeons, and also all clinicians also will be useful. So I thank the Department of Physiology for arranging such a wonderful webinar on stress management. I wish this webinar is a successful one. Thank you. Thank you, Ramada.
Thank you so much, sir. Our HOD ma'am will share the scientific session. I request you all to post your queries and questions in the chat box, which will be answered at end of after finishing both the speakers. Now I welcome Dr. R. Babita, Professor, Department of Physiology, to introduce the first speaker of today's webinar.
Very good morning to all. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker of the first session, Dr. S. Anu. Madam is in the field of physiology for 17 years. I know ma'am personally for the past 13 years. She is a dynamic, confident, and very efficient person. She is a good administrator too. Presently, she is working as professor and head of the Department of Physiology, Velamal Medical College Hospital and Research Institute. She is the coordinator for research and development and course director for Velamal NEET PG program. Dr. S. completed her UG at Madras Medical College and PG at Stanley Medical College. She has done 3 postgraduate diploma courses in diabetology, yoga and naturopathy, and biostatistics. She has organized 2 state-level quiz competitions, 2 national-level basic medical conferences, namely WIN Basics 2010 and Med Genetics 2010. She has organized seminars and webinars. She is a reviewer of National Journal of Physiology. Ma'am has presented 6 guest lectures. She is having 25 national and international publications to her credit. Now, I request Dr. S. Anu ma'am to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Babita, for the nice words. Good morning, one and all. At the outset, I would like to express my thanks to the management, Dean Sir, MS Sir, and Dr. Usha Madam, the Vice Principal, for giving me this opportunity. I would also like to extend my thanks to Dr. Uma Maheshwari, HOD Physiology Department, and my friends, Professor Nirupa, Dr. Babita, and Dr. Bharati for sharing today's session, for giving me the opportunity. And very special thanks to Nirupa for inviting me to this program. Thank you. The topic of today's session is physiology of stress. Stress, is it a good word or a bad word? Always stress we related to in the negative aspect. Is it good or bad, stress? A man without stress is a dead man. This is not my quote. This is a quote from Hans Selye, as Madam said, HOD Madam said, the father of stress research. A little amount of stress is always essential for adaptation and survival. See, for example, only if you hard work for your exams, stress is there for your exams, okay? Only if you hard work, you can pass in the exams. If you struggle hard for winning a competition and if you won the competition, the stress is essential for that. So always some amount of stress is required for our survival. Let me just start with a simple me. I'll just try to read out this. Me trying to excel in my career, maintain a social life, drink enough water, exercise, text everyone back, stay sane, survive and be happy. I'm doing all things perfectly. Living my best life, but more like stress life, shaking my damn head. So I'm trying to do all my things better in a perfect way, but in this process, I'm stressed too. Today's content is stress, definition of stress and stresses, role of autonomic nervous system in stress, stages of stress, types and impact of stress, prevention of stress, management of stress is Dr. Vidya. I'm not going to touch that. So, stress. Stress is nothing but a non-specific response of the body to any demand. A physical demand or a mental demand, external or internal threat. It's a response of the body to any demand. This is Hans Selye, the father of stress research. Stress is an innate defensive mechanism. The stress matrix, like whether you are going to cope up with the stress in later life or whether you will be vulnerable to stress, you won't be able to cope up with the stress. All these are decided in the early period of your life. That is, it starts in the prenatal period, prenatal, childhood, adolescence. So that period itself, everything is decided. Stress physiology is psychophysiology. I cannot talk physiology of stress without the psychological aspects. It is a mind-body relationship. Why? Because most of the illnesses are psychosomatic illness. It starts in the brain. Psychosomatic illness. For example, irritable bowel syndrome, stress ulcer, stress-related hypertension, asthma. All these are stress-related events. And why today's topic? Why do you have to know about stress physiology? Only if you know the mechanism of stress, then we can adopt correct mechanisms, correct ways to release the stress. We can adopt different mechanisms to release stress. In the Stone Age period, the main cause of threat, stressor, is the external threat, the physical threat. The main threat is the physical threat. But nowadays, the important stressors are not only physical, physiological, for example, exercise, childbirth, etc., psychological, changes in your environment, meeting with an accident or unexpected event, imaginary or unreal situation. See, in fact, In most of the cases, it is the imaginations that is the most important cause for stress. So any event which an individual finds difficult to cope with, we call it as stressors. We have external stressors, internal stressors. I discussed in the beginning, there is good stress, which is also called as eustress for studying for your examination, etc. Definitely, it improves your physical and mental well-being. This acute or good stress will increase your memory, boost up your immunity. It is going to help you in a lot of ways. Bad stress, which is also called as distress or allostasis, has a negative impact on your body and mind if it remains there for a long time. Physiological systems involved in stress response. Of course, we all know that. Nervous system, endocrine system, and immune system. All these three systems are involved in combating stress. In nervous system, there are three levels of operation: vegetative level, subconscious level, all our breathing, heart rate, okay, all these operate at this level. Limbic level, emotions will be operating at this level. Neocortical level, it will operate at will with our consciousness. This higher level can override the influence of both the lower levels. We can consciously avoid fear and all those manifestations of distress with this neocortex. Look at this picture. The lower level, vegetative level, includes the brainstem structures. Limbic level involves the limbic system structures like thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, hippocampus. And neocortical level involves the cerebral cortex. See, this is the limbic level. All these structures are involved. So we just discussed about what is stress, a non-specific response, and we discussed about the different types of stresses: physical, physiological, chemical, psychological, all these things. Now we are going to discuss the role of autonomic nervous system in the stress response. ANS stands for autonomic nervous system. Can I have the poll question, please? You can pose the first question. A request to the audience, can you please answer this? Which nervous system gets activated during stress? Is it parasympathetic or sympathetic? Is done. Can you share the results, sir? Very good, excellent. It is sympathetic. So we have two components of autonomic nervous system. It is parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is for normal homeostasis, constancy of internal environment, for baseline activities, rest, digestion, anabolic activities. Whereas sympathetic is mainly for adaptation and survival, to combat stress. Sympathetic is mainly for stress mechanism, right? There should be a balance of both these things in our body. Both these systems, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, are always partially active at times. Look at this picture. This arrow shows the baseline level. The parasympathetic and sympathetic are at a balance. Your autonomic nervous system is at a balance. Now, when you're sleeping, which system will be dominant? Parasympathetic or sympathetic? Students, can anyone answer? You can answer in a chat box too. Which system will be active? During sleep, sympathetic or parasympathetic? Okay, fine. It is parasympathetic. During sleep, it is parasympathetic for conserving energy. Okay. Now, imagine morning you're getting up leisurely at 6 o'clock. Suddenly you remember you have a deadline to complete. You have to finish your assignment before 8 o'clock. You have to submit today. Now, which system gets activated immediately? Your sympathetic nervous system. It gets activated when you're stressed. It is a good stress only. You have to complete your assignment. Once you're assigned, your memory becomes focused, your attention increases, you complete the task. So once the task is over, what happens? The sympathetic stimulus withdraws. You come back to the baseline, and that is held by parasympathetic also. After finishing your assignment, for example, if you are going to have your breakfast, the food you like, in a calm, peaceful atmosphere without any audio, video, everything, if you are going to have your food, which system is going to get activated now? Parasympathetic, okay, which helps your digestion, everything. So this is proved by many studies. So your parasympathetic gets activated. Then it comes back to the basal level after some time. Now you're going out of your house, you have to catch the bus. Which system gets activated? Again, it is sympathetic nervous system. So throughout the day, you will be exposed to mild stress, smaller stresses, and your sympathetic will keep on getting activated. A balance of both these is essential for the normal survival of your life. Stress response. So once you are exposed to a threat, immediately the hypothalamus will respond. Number one, by activating autonomic nervous system. As I told you now, sympathetic nervous system. Remember, stress, sympathetic nervous system. Immediately within seconds, there is also activation of hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. I'll show you this picture. Look at this. Stress activates hypothalamus, activates pituitary. Hypothalamus is activated, CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone is released. Pituitary releases ACTH. ACTH acts on adrenal cortex to release glucocorticoids. And glucocorticoid will exert its action. So number 2 point, stress. Remember the hormones, CRH, ACTH, mainly glucocorticoids. And of course, you know, the neurotransmitter released by sympathetic nervous system. What are the neurotransmitters? Epinephrine and norepinephrine. And stress response also involves the secretion of ergonin and vasopressin, which is nothing but, you know, this hormone, ADH, anti-diuretic hormone, which helps in conservation of water. So stress response involves sympathetic nervous system, hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, and ADH. Stress hormones. Can you name the stress hormones? Just now we discussed. Catecholamines, norepinephrine and epinephrine, CRH, ACTH, the most important glucocorticoids for catecholamines to act, ADH, even glucagon, which increases your blood sugar level during stress, growth hormone, acute stress. Chronic stress, growth hormone level will decrease. Thyroxine, acute stress. So all these are stress hormones. The hormones, once you are exposed to any threat or stressful situation, all these hormones will come into action to bring back your body to normal homeostasis. Now, this is helped by the happy hormones. We have something called happy hormones in our body, secreted by our brain. Always it is there in your brain, endorphin. I think you all know the commonest activity which releases endorphin is exercise. Regular exercise releases this endorphin. It gives a sense of well-being. It has got analgesic effect. It reduces the pain, etc. And dopamine released by nucleus accumbens and other structures. Once you complete a task, you get a satisfaction or a rewarding sensation. That is by dopamine. Serotonin involved in pain relieving, sleep, and all other activities. Happy hormone. Oxytocin, a hormone which is responsible for bonding or intimacy, oxytocin. For example, when you play with your pet animals, this oxytocin secretion will be more, increases your bonding. Mother playing with the child. Like all these are happy hormones. So To combat stress, we should try to decrease the level of the stress hormones and increase the level of the happy hormones in our body. So we discussed about the role of autonomic nervous system and other hormones, both stress hormones and happy hormones in stress. Now, stages of stress. What are the stages of stress? This Canadian scientist, Hans Selye, he has given a set of stages of stress, which together we call it as General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS, General Adaptation Syndrome. It involves 3 stages. Stage 1, alarm reaction. You know there is a threat and your body becomes prepared to combat that stress, alarm reaction. And stage 2 is the resistance stage or adaptive stage. And coming back to normal almost. And stage 3 is the exhaustive stage. See, if your adaptation is complete, if the compensation is complete, you go for recovery. If the compensation mechanism is unsuccessful, then you go for exhaustion. So remember, there are 3 stages: alarm reaction, resistance, and exhaustion. Alarm stage. This is also called this fight or flight reaction. Flight, we'll take this flight because I prefer this. Flight or fight reaction. You would have read in your CNS, flight or fight reaction. This has got 2 stages, shock stage and anti-shock stage. I'll talk about this later. Now, the commonest example we always give. Imagine you are in a forest and suddenly you're coming across an animal, wild animal. Obviously, we will try to escape from that place, or if you are bold enough, you will try to fight with that animal. The same happens with everyday stresses, right? So you have to take any one of these steps. Now, when you're facing a wild animal, the first reaction that happens is the alarm stage. Immediately you'll be shocked. Oh, animal is here. Within seconds, the body tries to increase the cortisol level, catecholamine levels, to give energy for you to run away from that place. This stage is called as flight reaction or fight reaction. Choice is yours. So what happens is, for example, my choice is to move away from that place, to flee away from that place. So for that, I should be alert, I should be active, my mind should be very active, my memory should be sharp, my attention should be focused. So immediately, all these hormones, nervous system will activate your brain, reticular formation, all these areas, right? And number 2, to move away from that place, to run away from that area, you should have a good vision. Pupils dilate, to have a clear vision, right? And number 3, you need more oxygen because you're going to run away from that place. You need more oxygen for all your working muscles. So for that, the ventilation needs to be increased. This is helped by bronchodilation of the catecholamines. There is bronchodilation. And here, see, I'm trying to run away from that place. For example, the working muscles or the lower limb muscles. These muscles require more oxygen supply, energy to move away from that place. So to supply more blood to this area, the heart starts pumping more. Sympathetic activates the heart. So blood pressure is increased. Vasodilation in the working muscles so that more blood is diverted to this area. Vasoconstriction in other areas of the body. This will increase the blood pressure and favors the movement of blood towards the required area, right? And not only that, when you're trying to run away from that place or fight away that animal, there are more chances of injuries. Okay, even to correct that, the body's homeostasis mechanism is there. The bleeding time is reduced. To reduce your bleeding time is reduced by increased production of platelets. And during this period of acute stress, you should not feel your pain. So if you concentrate on your pain, you cannot run away from that place. So this stress itself will activate the analgesic system via endorphins, descending analgesia pathway. It stimulates that pathway to decrease your pain. That is what we call it as stress-induced analgesia, right? So these are the things which happens when you're exposed to a sudden threat. See, digestion slows down, pupils dilate, increased heart rate, fast breathing, increased sweating, increased blood pressure, and you need more energy. There is glycogenolysis and lipolysis, more glucose, more fatty acids are released. So this is what happens during alarm stage. a small video on this flight or fight reaction. Here we go. So the first stage is flight or fight response. Second stage is stage of resistance or adaptation. Now, if the threat is removed, like in the previous video, the animal has gone. So now the body will try to adapt. So what happens is all the hormonal levels will return back to the normal. Your parasympathetic system gets activated. This is the stage of adaptation. But if the threat still persists, the body will try to adapt to this, and you will have a lot of physical manifestations like irritability, impatience, sleep disturbances, all these things. The next stage is stage of recovery or exhaustion. If the threat is not there, successfully you come for the recovery stage. But if the threat is still persisting, if the animal is still chasing you continuously, then all your energy sources are depleted, hormonal levels will decrease. So you go for adrenal exhaustion. So automatically your blood sugar decreases, your BP decreases, and you go for collapse. So this is a graph showing the three stages: alarm reaction, resistance, and exhaustion. See, the first stage, you are sensing the danger. Immediately you are in shock, everything goes down, blood pressure, everything goes down. Now, immediately when you perceive the stress, the sympathetic nervous system and hormones get released. So what happens is, it is trying to cope up with the stress. This is a flight or fright reaction. And the body gets adapted to this by using the hormones. This is stage of resistance. If the threat is removed, you will have a recovery, not shown here. But if the threat still persists, all the sources, energy sources will be depleted, and you go for exhaustion. This leads to illness, etc. Let me show this flow chart. External threat sensed by the individual. I'm taking the same example, the animal, the snake. The first response is flight or fight response. So flight, you try to move away from that area, or fight response. The hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol are released. The next stage is adaptation stage. If the threat is removed, parasympathetic activation occurs, and all the cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine will go down. But if the threat still persists, there will be increased cortisol, and after a particular stage, there is depletion of energy sources, and this will result in illness. Can I have the poll question? Okay. 30 minutes over. Can I have the poll question? The second question, yes. In general, which type of stress you are consciously aware of? You know that you are on stress. Which stress? Is it acute stress or chronic stress? Can I have the poll results? Excellent. It is acute stress. So the next topic which we are going to discuss is type and impact of stress. Very simple, acute stress, a short-lived, time-limited stress. You know when it starts and when it is going to end. For example, running to catch a bus, a daily routine event. This is acute stress. See, this stress, if you are exposed to acute small stresses like this, it will increase your cortisol, which is beneficial. I told you, it increases your immunity, alertness, everything. And chronic stress, there is persistent increase in cortisol and mineralocorticoids. Screen shut up. Nirupa, can you see the screen? Okay. So cortisol and mineralocorticoids are increased. So if the stress persists for a long time, as you all said, chronic stress, we will ignore all the smaller stressor stimuli and they keep on accumulating. And in this process, we won't be aware that we are under stress too. So these people, they will have suicidal tendencies. All your immune system gets depleted. It becomes very tired and exhausted. So it starts destroying your body's own cells. So you may land up with autoimmune diseases. And it may not destroy the abnormal or cancer cells. Like it will start destroying the cytotoxic cells, natural killer cells, etc. So it will result in cancer. Please remember, stress can also lead to cancer, chronic stress. So impact of stress on your body. So if you are in chronic stress, what happens to different systems of your body? Your immune system gets weakened. You are prone for many illnesses, particularly common cold, flu, all these illnesses. And what happens to your heart? It keeps on pumping, okay? The blood pressure increases in chronic run, hypertension, okay? Coronary artery disease, even it can lead to stroke. And your digestive system gets disturbed. You may land up with constipation or diarrhea. Your gut flora is altered, which in turn can affect your mood, your brain function, your sleep, everything. And what happens is, please remember this, as students, you should know, the chronic stress will decrease the size of your hippocampus. Acute stress will increase your memory by activating hippocampus, but chronic cells will decrease the volume of the hippocampus, will decrease the growth of dendrites. At the same time, chronic stress also increases the growth in amygdala, the dendritic growth in amygdala. So there'll be more fear and emotional responses with chronic stress. And apart from that, if a child is exposed to chronic stress during the growing period, growth is retarded because we know cortisol inhibits growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor. During the reproductive stage, if that particular woman or man is under constant stress, it affects the reproductive functions, male, hypofertility, females, amenorrhea, irregular cycles. Because it inhibits with cortisol, inhibits GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, etc. And if a pregnant woman is stressed, the baby born will be of lower birth weight. And in later life, there are chances the cortisol levels might vary and the child have higher chances of getting metabolic syndrome. And chronic stress will lead to behavioral problems, becoming addictive to drinking, smoking, all these habits. And definitely the chronic stress will disturb your sleep. So to sum up, we discussed about stress, role of autonomic nervous system, stages of stress, types and impact of stress. The last part of today's topic is prevention of stress. Stress is unavoidable. You cannot control the external factors. The change should be within you. You should know how to combat with the stress, cope up with the stress. So optimism, positive outlook on life, which definitely is going to increase all the happy hormones in your body. Healthy lifestyle, low glycemic index foods, because if you are stressed, glucose level will be very high. So low glycemic index foods. Regular exercise, a very good way of increasing your endorphins, serotonin, etc. Improve the sleep quality. Music, massage, dance, sunlight exposure, which increases serotonin. Avoid all the unnecessary habits like smoking, drinking, and mobile usage, particularly in the night time. You can resort to techniques like relaxation techniques like mentally guided imagery and biofeedback. And the simple way to avoid stress is laughter. Laugh nicely, be happy always. The next 4 question, the last question. Can I have the question, please? Higher brain centers can override the stress response produced by lower brain centers. Yes or no? If suppose I want to control my stress, is it possible? Is it possible at my will? Can I do that? Yes or no? So I don't have much time. Can I have the results, please? Super. Yes. A small video. Let me complete with this. So you can see from the previous video how comforting words, yeah, reduces the stress and improves the health of the patient. So with this, I'm winding up. These are a few quotes from Hans Selye, which I liked it. Yesterday only I came across these quotes. As much as we thirst for approval, a beautiful quote, we dread condemnation. Adopting the right attitude can convert a negative stress into a positive one. It is not stress that kills us. It is our reaction to it. This is very important. With this, I'm completing. And shall laughter flicker light to the soul? Life is not perfect, but your smile can make it. Thank you. Screen closed. Can I leave?
Thank you very much, Anu ma'am, for a wonderful presentation of stress physiology and for sharing your knowledge with us. It is really a very interesting presentation, and the last few slides are extraordinary. It is a value for life. Thank you once again, ma'am. Now I request Dr. R. Muruga, Professor, Department of Physiology, to introduce the second speaker of today's session, Dr. Vidya Mohandas.
A very healthy good morning to all. I'm very happy to introduce our speaker, young researcher award winner, Dr. Vidya Mohandas, a consultant psychiatrist in Kamakshi Memorial Hospital, Pallikaranai. She is also a visiting consultant in many corporate hospitals in Tambaram and Navadi, Chennai. She has got 8 years of experience in management of psychiatric emergencies, administration of psychotherapies, rehabilitation and management of chronic mentally ill patients. She is trained in child and adolescent psychiatry in Child Guidance Clinic ICH and also community psychiatry through SCAR Community Mental Health Program. She has done and research and published papers related to schizophrenia. Dr. Vidya has presented a case series of Capgras and Frigoli in International Conference on Schizophrenia in the year 2016. Her areas of interest in psychiatry being suicide prevention, management of depression and anxiety disorders, psychotherapy and counseling, child and adolescent psychiatry, and de-addiction. And she has featured in Sun TV and Pudhiya Thalaimurai talk shows related to psychiatric illness. We are very delighted to have you, Dr. Vidya, here. And over to you, Dr. Vidya. Happy learning to all of us. Hi, Vidya.
Hi. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity, and thanks Nirupa ma'am for considering me for this topic.
Vidya can share your screen. Vidya can share. Dr. Vidya can share your screen.
Yes. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. And today I'll be talking about stress management. I thank the physiology department and all the faculty members of Annapurna Medical College for giving me this opportunity. And I'm a little stressed after listening to Anu ma'am's speech, and I don't know if I will be able to keep up to her standards, but I will make my best efforts. So the outline of my presentation will be what is the difference between stressor and the stress response? What are the types of stress? What is the connection between being stressed and our performance? How do we manage stress? Does gadget usage for recreational purposes help us to combat stress? What is resilience? When should we seek professional help for stress disorders? And conclusion. So, like Anu ma'am said, a stressor is a stimulus which will trigger a stress response. So this stimulus can be either external or internal. So it could be an internal pain, or it could be a adversity or a stressful situation from outside that demands a response from our body and mind. A stress response is the reaction of our body when the brain perceives something as a potential threat. It could be short-lived or it could continue. It could go for chronicity. Now, this stress response is highly individualized. It is based on our genetic makeup, based on our childhood adversity, that each one of us will respond in a different way to a similar stress. Coming to the types of stress, now there are basically two kinds of stress. One is positive stress and the other one is tolerable stress. So a positive stress happens to normal day-to-day activities like having exams or attending a meeting, or I have a breakdown of my car. So these small stressful events will initiate a stress response from my body, which is important, which is necessary, and it is short-lived. The response is between mild to moderate severity. Now, when there is a major life adversity, we go in for a little severe form of stress, which is tolerable stress. When there is a loss of a loved one in the family, when we meet with a major injury, or we go through a separation or a divorce, then we initiate this, we stimulate the stress response from moderate to severe category, and it goes for chronicity, it is prolonged. It does cause some physiological as well as anatomical changes in the brain connections, but with appropriate social support and appropriate stress management techniques, we can able to combat this tolerable stress and we can reach normalcy or come back to homeostasis. Now, coming to what is called as toxic stress, which is a disorder. This toxic stress, the precipitant for a toxic stress need not be very severe. So it could be a mild precipitant also, but based on the individual's makeup, his genetic makeup, and an individual's personality, the way an individual responds to a stressful situation could be toxic if his threshold is very low. Even for a mild stimuli, if he stimulates his stress response to a very great extent, then the stress response keeps getting activated repeatedly for minor stressors, and there is a risk of stress-related physical and psychiatric illness. So how to keep the stress response within permissible limits and increase our performance is all about the stress management technique. So this is a very famous curve called as the Yankee-Dodson curve, where there is we make a graph between the performance and stress. So we find that in the initial part of stress, we require some positive stress to enhance our performance. But when we miss out on managing the stress response, when it goes for chronicity or when it goes for excessive response, then we go in for anxiety, disorganization, loss of balance, loss of homeostasis, and our performance comes down. Now, how meticulously we manage the stress response will decide our performance and the way we react to an adversity in life. So stress management is not of how to manage a particular situation. It is a day-to-day practice, which means we have to invest in our physical and mental health on a daily basis so that we will be able to handle an adversity better. So we have to invest in physical health and mental health. Investing in physical health, as has already been told, is about diet, physical activity, and sleep. In mental health, we have to start creating self-awareness, do cognitive restructuring, time management, problem solving, muscle relaxation practices, meditation, and yoga. I will be talking about each of this in detail. First is diet. Why should I maintain a healthy diet, and what impact does that have on my mood and my behavior and my ability to respond to an adversity? So a lot of research has been recently done on this gut-brain axis, where the microbial flora of the gut will decide upon the neurotransmitter balance in the brain. As ma'am told already, there are a lot of neurotransmitters in the brain, and a meticulous management of their levels is required to have a normal mood, a normal behavior, and to have a proper emotional control on ourselves. So maintaining a microbial flora has a major impact on the neurotransmitter balance in the brain, and to maintain a proper microbial flora, we require a healthy diet. There has been extensive research on the association between high carbohydrate diet and excessive intake of processed food and the development of depression and anxiety in later life. So healthy diet plays a major role in deciding our mood and behavior. Next is physical activity. Now, physical activity alone as a monotherapy has been designed for mild to moderate depressive disorders, which means daily physical activity will help us to correct the neurotransmitter imbalance that happens with depression. So it increases the anxiolytic neurotransmitters and it increases the endorphins. We require a daily dose of endorphins and dopamine for us to have a sense of purpose in the life. So this happens with a regular physical activity. Next is sleep. So during COVID, WHO's major recommendation was to maintain a social rhythm. That is, be it a holiday, be it lockdown, or be it a working day, you maintain the same social rhythm on all days. You sleep in the same time, you get up in the same time, you dress up, and include physical activity, mental activity, and social activity. Incorporate all these three activities into the life. So that we don't give ourselves the risk of developing stress. So prolonged sleep, a lot of things happen during sleep. There is processing of memories, organization of memories happen, a lot of things happen in the brain. So when there is a prolonged sleep deprivation, the next few days or the next day morning, you will find yourself to be very angry or have poor concentration, have a lot of memory lapses, and the frustration tolerance also comes down when there is a prolonged sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation not only means sleeping for 8 hours. It means you have to follow the circadian rhythm. You have to sleep at around 10 o'clock and get up at around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So you have to maintain the cycle. And the sleep has to be continuous. It should not be fragmented and disturbed. And the onset of sleep, of how you go to sleep, is very important. Watching a gadget or having a very confused and ruminating mind while falling asleep will give you will not give you a sense of freshness when you get up the next day. So next we come to the most important part, that is how to take care of mental health when how this plays a major role in managing stress. So when first thing is becoming more aware. So when there is a stressor or a stressful situation, we should start becoming more aware of what we are thinking, what we are feeling, what kind of emotions we have, and with these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, how we are behaving for that particular situation. Now, since I was told that a lot of students are attending this webinar, I have chosen this example. Like, for example, there is university exam preparation. So the automatic thoughts which most students might have is, I cannot recall my portions. We have humongous portions. I cannot complete my portions within study holidays. My friend is preparing. He's working hard better than me. I'm completely going to fail. Or let me absent myself to the exam and let me prepare properly for the next 6 months. Now, these kind of thoughts might come to our mind. So what will happen when we have these thoughts? So there are a lot of palpitations, tremors, churning sensation in the stomach. So these will have these kind of sensations, and emotions are, we feel very depressed, we feel guilty for not having made use of the time, we feel rejected, we have self-pity, or we become hypercritical on ourselves of why we did not study properly. There is anger and frustration. So with all this, we will try to ruminate. Rumination is having increased number of thoughts, one after the other, and we don't have control over it. So we might ruminate, we might procrastinate on our reading habits, we may have poor sleep, poor appetite, and we might use excess gadgets. Now, I find a lot of students, college students, and school students getting into gadget usage during this lockdown because they have a lot of time and they have started ruminating a lot. So these are the behaviors we will have if we have these thoughts. Now, cognitive restructuring is a process where you become aware of how your mind is working, of how your mind is reacting to a particular stress. So this is to come aside, to be like a third person and look at your own mind. That is called as metacognition. So you find out what kind of thoughts are coming to my mind following this stress, and what kind of cognitive appraisal do I have. This is, sometimes we confuse a fact and a mental event. For example, I'm sitting here, I'm getting multiple sensations, like I'm sitting in a couch, I'm able to feel the couch, I'm able to feel the dress on my body, I'm able to feel the air, I'm looking at my slides, I'm hearing my own voice, but I'm prioritizing certain sensations and I am trying to distract myself or deny the other sensation. So following a stressor or an adversity, our mind will pour a lot of thoughts. They are called as automatic thoughts. So from these automatic thoughts, it is our duty to select what are all the positive things which will help me to handle the stress better, and what are all the negative thoughts I am getting and how I am supposed to get rid of them. It is not necessary to give importance to each and every thought that you get following a stressor and get identified with the same. So this kind of a cognitive appraisal skill we have to develop so that we don't get identified with all the thoughts that we get during a stressful event. So identify what kind of distortions we are making. We can catastrophize. We can think like just failing in an internal assessment exam, we will think we will fail in the university exam. We make assumptions. Our friend might have not studied, might have be far behind us, but just by looking at the way he is studying, we will assume that he has studied, he's much ahead of me and I have not done anything. We will disqualify the positives. There would have been situations in life where we would have excellently handled stressors and adversities, but we will always be reminded of some negative events and we will feel that this time also I'm not going to perform properly. We might have black and white thinking, like I will have to complete my portions 100% and then only I should go to the exams. Most of us know that completing portions 100%, and even toppers don't do that. They cannot do it. So I should complete and I have to attend, or I should never attend the exams till I complete. Let me absent myself and prepare for the next 6 months. So let us not have this black and white thinking. This is a very rigid thinking. So we should not be very rigid and critical and rude on ourselves. We should try and manipulate with our own brain, try to tease out the negative thoughts, identify them as negative, and give less importance so that the chance of these negative thoughts occurring again and again in our brain becomes less. So during cognitive restructuring, you have to generate alternative thoughts for the same situation. Like for this exam, you can generate thoughts like, let me prioritize my portions. What are the important things I have to learn in the given time? Let me make a flexible and a realistic plan instead of making a plan which I will not be able to follow at all. And follow a mental health routine so that it will help you to follow your plan. Anticipation. Anticipation is not anticipatory anxiety. Anticipatory anxiety is expecting something bad, expecting that something bad is going to happen and becoming anxious about it, imagining something bad. Anticipation is you expect the possible negative outcomes and be prepared to face them. Okay, if this is going to happen, if I'm not able to complete these portions, what is my plan B? How am I going to manage? So you have an anticipation beforehand so that when it occurs, it is not so stressful for you. And you become aware of the process of rumination. I'm just ruminating. I'm just having these negative thoughts. It is not necessary that I have to give importance to these thoughts. These are just rumination, and concentrate on one day at a time. Concentrate on what you're doing for today and give your heart and soul for that work you're doing for today, and don't keep ruminating about what you will be doing tomorrow or keep changing the timetable for preparation. Next is time management skill. Many times we feel that there is too much in my plate and 24 hours is not enough for me. So to effectively manage time, we always give this to our patients, where you have 4 columns and you write all your activities and try to fit into any of these 4 columns. So you divide them into activities which are most important and urgent, do them first, followed by those activities which are very important but not urgent. Then you follow it with not so important but urgent activities, and finally the not important and not urgent activities can be postponed or even deleted from your routine. So when we do activities, we have a clarity in our mind. So it is like, searching a book in the library instead of searching a book in a puddled or in a confused shelf. Another important skill is problem solving skill. Many times we will encounter with a problem and we will not know what solution we have to choose, because every solution will have some disadvantages. Initially, if there is a problem, always we need to understand that every solution is going to come with a disadvantage. There is no perfect solution to any problem at hand. So first define the particular problem. What is this problem and why I should answer this problem, or why I should find a solution for this problem. So it has to be your problem, and you should not be ruminating about something which is bothering another person's life, about which you will not be having any control. So if it is your problem, first define it, why this problem is important to me and what is this problem, and generate multiple solutions. You will definitely have multiple solutions for a problem, and analyze each solution, which means you generate advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons for each solution, and give them points or marks, weightage for each of these points. And finally, you will be able to choose a solution which has the maximum advantages and minimal disadvantages. And by choosing this solution, you will not have any regrets or rumination later. Now, other daily practices which we can do to bring down the autonomic arousal in our body are muscle relaxation and meditation practices. Now, muscle relaxation is not exercise. It is consciously being aware of our muscles. Now, when we spend too much of time with the gadgets or with the system, now a lot of online education has come. So a lot of students are spending time with their system. Now they are not aware that they are keeping their neck muscles, their shoulder muscles under contraction for most of the time, which will go for spasms and cervical straightening and vertigo, and also aches and pains, which is just an expression of that your body is very stressed. So this progressive muscle relaxation practices, when you do it on a daily basis, it takes around 15 to 20 minutes, and it is available as a guided audio in many YouTube videos. So when you do this, you become more consciously aware of the muscles in your body. You know, physically, muscles have to be relaxed. Those parts of body which we are not using during an activity should be relaxed, and those parts which we are using should be put into action. So this kind of a differential training we have to do. And when we do this, the autonomic arousal which happens in chronic stress comes down to a great extent. Next is meditation. There are lots of forms of meditation. Now, this mindful breathing meditation is based on research. It has got a lot of evidence in curtailing depression, anxiety symptoms, and even impulse control disorders. It is a very simple meditation. It takes around 15 to 20 minutes, where you have to sit in a calm place with a back rest, close your eyes, and become aware of the breathing process. Now, you needn't have to laboriously breathe or slow down your breathing process. You just have to become aware of the normal breathing that is happening. Now, when we do this, our mind will generate a lot of thoughts. So you should not stop these thoughts. When we try to stop thoughts in our mind, it will present with the double the amount of thoughts. So we try and understand that mind is working. If mind is working, it will be keep generating thoughts. So don't try to analyze, don't try to stop, or don't try to get entangled with the thought. You keep your awareness on the breathing process. Allow the thoughts to come and go. Don't become very judgmental about the thoughts. So you accept that, yes, now I am thinking, but I'm going to keep my awareness on my breathing. When you practice this continuously, we will find that this rumination, which is a major culprit behind stress, comes down. The negative automatic thoughts which we get following a stressor comes down, and our mind becomes a little calmer, so that we will be able to concentrate more on the task at hand. Now, I have purposefully included the gadget usage and stress, because I find a lot of students coming to me with gadget addiction recently. And I want to tell the students that why gadget usage for recreational activity will not help you to combat stress in the long term, but it will help you to increase your stress. Now, how this happens? Now, this is called as the reward circuit of the brain, where this reward circuit will work whenever there is a pleasurable stimuli, an infatuation, falling in love, or having money, or gaining an appreciation, or just watching a movie will give us a sense of pleasure. Now, this sense of pleasure is because there is a lot of dopamine pumping into the prefrontal cortex of our brain. When there is excess dopamine in this area, we have a sense of pleasure. Now, with gadget usage, I will tell you what actually happens. Now, this is true with many of the addictive disorders. The reward pathway gets hyperstimulated, which means the prefrontal cortex is flooded with dopamine. Now, when there is a sharp excess increase in dopamine, our mind thinks that this pleasure is so nice and I want to have it again and again. So there is a positive reinforcement, and we repeatedly start doing this activity. So what happens when we repeatedly hyperstimulate our prefrontal cortex? It will nullify the effect of other natural rewards. Now, other normal natural rewarding activities like completing a lesson, studying a portion, or talking to your friend, or reading book, all these kind of small natural rewards will not increase the dopamine. So it will nullify the effect of natural reward on the prefrontal cortex. So what happens is that these natural rewards will not give us the pleasure as it was giving before. Second is, you will start excessively using the same stimuli. That is, you will start excessively using the gadget for the same pleasurable effect that you are getting. You will lose control over the time duration for which you are using gadgets. And in spite of knowing that this is taking all my time, this is bringing down my concentration, this is causing so much of physical harm, you will not be able to stop it. That is where you will slowly go in for addiction. And when you don't use the gadget, you will get into a negative mood. you will get into a dysphoric mode, and to handle that dysphoric mode, you will start using gadgets. A lot of students tell me that I don't want to ruminate about my exams, so I take a break and use my gadget. So when you use gadget for recreational purpose, slowly it takes control over your mind, and it will see to that when you study, you will want to take lot of frequent breaks. And when you get into this gadget usage, it is very difficult for you to come back to studies, because studying becomes very boring and less rewarding when you start using gadgets. So be very careful about the pattern of your gadget usage when you are using it as a recreation during your study holidays. And resilience. Resilience is the capacity to successfully adapt to a stressful situation so that you function normally in spite of the presence of stressor. You are normally functioning. So initially we react to a stress, followed by we try to adapt to the stress, and finally we reach the homeostasis, that is we cope up with the stress. Now, following an adversity, we have a lot of choices. We can become dysfunctional and continue with the dysfunctionality for a long time. That is called as post-traumatic stress. Now, I have lost this, and I have lost something in my life, and I am going to be sad. I am not going to enjoy anything. I am not going to bounce back. You make a choice and you continue with the dysfunction. Second is you bounce back to normalcy. Initially, you are disturbed. There is a loss of homeostasis, and then you bounce back to your normal ability, like how you were before the stress. You reach the normal homeostasis. Next is the best way to be resilient is to bounce back with increased effectiveness. Like when there is a stressor, you identify, why am I reacting so badly to the stress? What are all my weaknesses? What are all where I have to concentrate? How should I build strength upon my weakness? And you become a better person, you learn a new skill, and you come out from the stressor as a new person. So this is the best way to be resilient. Now, why do we find that some human beings become stressful? For you could have seen some women are so stressful for small issues. If the maid doesn't turn up, if your friend doesn't talk to you, you become so stressful for 2-3 days that you're not able to manage yourself. But for some, even if they have, during COVID times, we have seen that they have lost their family member, but within 1 or 2 months, they have come back to their normalcy, they have reached homeostasis. Now, why for some it is possible and for the others it is not possible? There are a lot of internal and external factors which determine the resilience. If you have a good social support network, then the chance of bouncing back is very easy. Here, social network, I mean in-person social support, and not the million followers which we have in Instagram or YouTube subscriber. You should have in-person social support in the form of friends, family members. And being more spiritual. Spirituality is not religiosity. It is becoming more aware of self and mastering your mind by meditation and yoga practices. And you should accept your fault and seek help when you need them. Lot of people think that I will be able to manage a lot of things. I am not supposed to go and tell another person that I'm depressed, I'm dull, I'm feeling anxious. They will think bad about me, or I have projected myself as a very strong person and I cannot let out my weakness. No, help-seeking behavior will improve resilience, and there is nothing wrong in showing your negative side, or it is not negative, it is a normal human emotion that you would want to share. Lot of internal factors, like I have already mentioned, maintaining good physical health, maintaining a mental health routine, sometimes genetic vulnerability, like if we have a vulnerable gene which we have inherited because of family history of psychiatric illness, that can play a role in our resilience. But accepting and dealing with our weakness is most important internal factor which we have to develop by improving self-awareness. So many times we find that patients, students are not able to differentiate between what is stress and what is a disorder, a psychiatric illness. Many times they would have developed depression and a proper anxiety disorder, but still they will think that this is just a stress and I have to cope up with myself. So always there are certain warning signs and symptoms where you have to seek professional help without any hesitancy, without any stigma. One is suicidal. If you feel suicidal immediately, definitely, even if it is an impulsive suicidal tendency or if it is a chronic suicidal tendency, you will have to seek professional help for it. You feel depressed. Now, depression is a very commonly abused term. I will tell you what is depression. Depression is a diagnosis. It has a specific diagnostic criteria. Now, when you have a pervasive low mood means your low mood should pervade into all the daily activities that you are doing. You should lose interest in daily activities, lose interest in grooming, lose interest in studying, lose interest in talking to your friends. So the low mood should pervade into each and every one of the daily activities that you're doing. So when the low mood is so pervasive, when there is a low mental and physical energy to perform activities, and most importantly, anhedonia or inability to experience pleasure to the usual pleasurable stimuli. Like you eat your favorite food, you watch your favorite show in the TV, and still you don't feel like, feel very happy. When you have these symptoms for more than 2 weeks, 2 weeks is the time period. When it lasts for more than 2 weeks, then it is a depressive disorder and it requires professional help. So if you feel bad for 2 days and then you bounce back, you talk to your friend, you are much better, it is normal worry and it is not depression. Sometimes a chronic stress can get converted to a somatic symptom, palpitations, tremors, gastritis, chronic pain, dyspnea, shortness of breath. You would have got yourself evaluated from physician. All investigations will be normal. They will tell you that this is because of stress. But now, knowing that you don't have any physical illness, don't leave it there. You have to get treated for your stress so that you get rid of these physical manifestations of stress. So when you have tried all your usual coping skills and it has failed and still you feel you are totally different, you are not your usual self, always seek professional help. So coping or being more resilient is an epigenetic phenomena. It is true that our genetic makeup and our childhood adversity upbringing will decide our way of handling stress. But if we make a choice to improve ourselves with each and every opportunity, then it is an epigenetic phenomenon, which means the environment induced changes in genes can happen and it can bring out changes in the structural and functional areas of the brain. It can increase synaptic connections somewhere. It can decrease synaptic connections in other places, and we will be able to cope better as we face every adversity as life goes on. So coping is an epigenetic phenomenon. There is always room for scope for improvement. And never have any stigma to seek professional help for mental health issues. Mental health is very, very important. Very important. Only when you have a healthy mind, you will be able to do any simple task in your life. And maintaining a mental hygiene is very important. This mind is a very important organ. Let us not use it like a trash bin by giving it a lot of negative thoughts, by feeding it with unhygienic, unhealthy food or improper lifestyle. All this has an impact on the mind. So maintain a mental hygiene on a day-to-day basis. Thanks a lot. There I end my presentation, and thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vidya, for your detailed presentation on stress management, which is really the need of the hour. The session is equally interesting and informative. Thanks again.
I thank both the speakers for the presentation and it was nice, interactive and informative. And Dr. Anu stressed on the various hormones that are released during stress and what are the systems that are activated during stress and the stages of stress and what happens in case of continuous stress if it continues. And Dr. Vidya Mohandas told the various ways and means to overcome stress. And I think by adopting at least some of the methods Madam suggested, if we incorporate in our day-to-day life, we can de-stress ourselves and lead a healthy life. And Madam also stressed the disadvantages of gadget usage and what are the symptoms of depression when the patient should seek medical advice in case of depression. So I thank both the speakers for their excellent presentation, for joining us and sharing their knowledge and spending their valuable time with us. Thank you. And I think we have few questions. This question
Ma'am, it's audible. Anna ma'am, it's audible, ma'am.
Yeah, audible.
So the first question is to Dr. Anu. What is the role of thyroid hormone in stress?
I told you it is increased in stress, acute stress especially. And when it is increased, it increases the cerebral excitability. And because of that, your BP increases, your parasympathetic nervous system decreases. So you'll be always anxious, irritable, etc. So that is the role. It increases your stress level.
Can regular phone usage at night cause stress? This is also to Dr. Anu.
Ma'am has already answered this question. The constant use of gadgets, how it affects the dopamine level. There is one more point I had seen in the textbooks. Late night usage of mobile also decreases the level of melatonin. We all know melatonin is a hormone which regulates the circadian rhythm. Cortisol follows the circadian rhythm. Increased secretion is in the early morning. We know that. Now, what happens is when you use mobile in late night, the melatonin secretion is reduced, and because of that, your circadian rhythm is changed. There'll be increased secretion of cortisol in the evening. So that will result in sleep deprivation because when more cortisol is in the evening, your BP increases, right? Your parasympathetic activity decreases. So you won't be able to sleep properly. This is a vicious cycle, right? And because of this, when more free fatty acids released during this stress can also enter your brain, affect your cognition, etc. Learning, memory, everything will be affected. That's it.
Thank you. And the next question is to Dr. Vidya Mohandas. How to overcome the stress of insomnia?
Exam-related stress, ma'am?
Insomnia. How to overcome insomnia?
Insomnia. Okay. Insomnia is a major problem. There could be a lot of causes for insomnia. So first, we try to find out if there is an underlying psychiatric illness that is causing this insomnia. So many times it is not primary insomnia. There could be depression, there could be anxiety, or there could be some other primary illness which has to be addressed. And once we address that, the insomnia goes away. So we have to find out a primary cause. Secondly, now because of inappropriate sleep practices, especially after lockdown, people don't follow sleep hygiene. There are a lot of sleep hygiene measures that one has to follow to get a proper sleep. The sleep quota comes down as we age. So we should be okay with 5 or 6 hours of sleep as we age. But less than 40 years, yes, 7 to 8 hours of sleep would be essential. Now, sleep hygiene measures are like not taking too many stimulants after 6 o'clock in the evening, having stimulants like coffee or tea or chocolates or coke drinks after 6 o'clock will keep our mind very alert. And taking food 2 hours before bedtime. And most important, most disturbing thing that while we fall asleep, we will have a lot of rumination, we'll have a lot of thinking that goes on. We cannot shut down our brain when we fall asleep. So to manage that, what we usually tell them is while falling asleep, concentrate on your breathing. You mindfully concentrate on the breathing process so that the mind slowly brings down the number of thoughts and you slowly fall asleep. Now, how we fall asleep is very, very important. And watching gadgets, as ma'am told, when you give some stimuli to the eyes or to the brain, then it is very difficult for us to sleep. Use the bedroom only for sleeping purpose, and eating and all activities should not be done in the bedroom, so that our mind makes a connection between this place and sleep. And some other practices that we can do is having some physical activity of 20 to 30 minutes, just 1 hour before going to sleep, again helps us. Now, if we have enough physical activity in the daytime, our body gets naturally tired and we get a good night's sleep. So we have to adopt all these sleep hygiene measures to have a good sleep. Using medications by self, I see a lot of students abusing sleeping pills like Anxet or Ativan by themselves because they are very anxious before exams and they want to sleep. Or some use stimulants like modafinil, so to keep themselves awake throughout the night before the examination. So abusing medications will alter your brain architecture and you will not be able to perform the next day. So abusing sleeping medications getting them over the counter should be avoided.
Thank you, madam, for your advice. We have two more questions, madam. Is it visible for you? It's in the chat box.
Yes. Exam stress, I think in my presentation, I have listed about exam stress.
Okay,
If
ma'am.
there are any specific doubts, they can ask. Managing stress after witnessing multiple COVID deaths. That's a very difficult question to answer. Personally, we had deaths in our family, and it's definitely very difficult to cope with COVID deaths. And working in a multi-specialty hospital, witnessing a lot of deaths and having done a lot of grief counseling in the last 2 months has taken a toll on my mental health too. So it is difficult, but somewhere we have to start practicing a detachment on things where we don't have control. We don't have control on certain things in the external environment, and we'll have to accept that, and we have to find out ways by which we can make this emotion better. Now, like, how can I help this family, or how should I do my duty better so that I can help this family in some way? So this kind of activities which we can involve in helping the family of the dead or doing our duty properly only can help us come out of it. It is very difficult to face a lot of deaths and be maintain the homeostasis at the same time. It is a normal stress response only. Another question is other ways to increase endorphins. There are a lot of unhealthy ways to increase endorphins, and I don't want to mention about them. Some other healthy ways is art. Now, music, dance, or painting, or some kind of art form, involving yourself in art form usually helps us to increase endorphins. So that we can try apart from exercise.
We have come to the end of the session. We have a certificate of this session. This is a token of appreciation. We are giving the certificate to both Dr. Anu and Dr. Vidya Mohan. Thank you, madam, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I request Dr. Bharti to propose the vote.
On behalf of the Department of Physiology, Annapurna Medical College and Hospital, first of all, I would express my gratitude to our guest speakers, Dr. S. Anu and Dr. Vidya Mohandas, for readily accepting our invitation amidst their busy schedule, and also for their excellent speech today. A special thanks to our respected chairman, Mr. J. Satish Kumar sir, who acts as a driving force in all our endeavors, especially during this pandemic period, for conducting this webinar. I would like to thank our Dean Professor Dr. Shanmugam sir for presiding over the webinar. I thank our dignitaries, MS Dr. N. Mohan sir and our Vice Principal Dr. P. Usha ma'am for their constant guidance and support. I would also like to thank our DMS Dr. Prasanna Babu sir and our Controller of Examinations Dr. PMS sir and Director Academics Professor Dhanashekaran sir for their support. I thank all the faculty, CRRS and students of both AMCH and other institutions who took part in this webinar. I also thank the non-teaching staffs of our department for their support. A very special thanks to Panchacharam team and IT department staffs without whose support this program wouldn't be possible.